Republican.
Democrat, Republican.
He wanted stronger, like state governments.
Stronger state governments. And what was his dream for America to be? A nation of what?
It was
You already said it.
like
For states to have more power.
States to have more power, but a nation of what type of people doing what type of jobs?
like farmers.
Farmers.
Nation of farmers, right?
Yeah.
So, in order for you to have farms, what do you need?
Need
Yeah,
land.
Workers, land.
You need land, right? You need land, right? So what does America need in order for it to be a farming, agrarian,
More,
76
more land.
people.
more land, right? More land expansion.
Louisiana Purchase.
Oh. Is that this?
So what do you have in the economies in the United States right now? What contrasting things are you having right now in the developing economies?
We have the
We have the manufacturing and
north.
Okay.
South being more farming and having plantations with heavily influenced by slavery.
Okay. So what political views are these groups aligned to? What would the manufacturing and all of them be aligned to? What party?
manufacturing would be aligned with the Federalists.
Okay.
While the plantation farming was aligned with the Republicans.
Okay. All right. So how the economy is tied to the political party that they're from. You understand that? And it's divided into, does geography play a role?
Yes.
Yes.
How does that play a role?
The manufacturing is related to north, and then on the other hand, farming to south.
Okay. All right, very good. So now, when Jefferson came on the scene, what did Jefferson portray himself to be?
For freedom, basically. So
Was he how did he portray himself to be to the people?
like at the start,
Yeah, as his president, what was the image that he crafted for himself? Anyone remember?
A representative?
He portrayed himself as an ordinary citizen. Like, I'm an average man like everybody else. But what was he in reality?
A president?
I mean, he's rich.
He was rich.
Whole plantation,
Yeah.
bunch of slaves.
President Trump, he portrays himself to be what?
Businessman?
The average American.
The average American, but in reality,
He's a
He's
millionaire.
about
Businessman.
so much.
1%.
His hospitals, 1%, yeah, 1%.
yeah. Kind of similar concept.
Synthesis. Chemistry.
What did Jefferson do when he became president with the government and the military?
Didn't he like change most of the Federalist ideas?
Yes, he
Republican.
started to reverse it and make government
More Republican.
smaller. Yeah. You can synthesize that with President Trump, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, with his him
Trying to downsize the bureaucracy and what.
and choosing who would be most promotions and stuff.
Now, there is a very, very, very important court case that happened when Thomas Jefferson became president. It's called Marbury versus Madison. You will need to know this court case by heart. It is one of the most important court cases in the United States of America. And I will show you a video on it right now.
Was it about personal liberties?
Huh?
Was it about personal liberties?
Actually, no.
Wasn't that about the judicial review?
Remember Negrete?
Judicial review, yes.
Judicial review.
The midnight judges.
Yes. Mr. Negrete taught you this already?
No. He
No.
taught us about different kinds of-
Court case about civil liberty.
Yeah, under the.
Yeah, but he basically taught us that since we went all over it.
Maybe we went over this. I don't know.
This is Marbury versus
We
Madison.
didn't go over that. That was too far back.
Oh yeah, we did more recent. We did more recent.
Gotta take a video
May 20th.
of what? For Jenna.
Can she just access?
Did you do our Adventist court case?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we did. Like about the Seventh-day Adventist.
About
Was it
like freedom of religion.
Yeah.
I still have it on my iPad.
He was like, "This is the most important one. You have to know this for the test."
Wait, what
We didn't even have it.
There's a TED video.
We did have a test, the final.
Alright, notice this video. I'll give,
Oh, can I turn off the line?
yeah,
No, we
I'll
have
turn
to
off
know,
the light.
we have to know those famous political people. Like,
Weird.
Now you can like Google what a YouTube Bill of Rights Institute for
Hi,
this video.
Michael.
But this is Marbury versus Madison in a nutshell.
When there's a clash between a law of Congress and the Constitution, who gets to decide what's constitutional? The answer now is the Supreme Court, thanks to the principle of judicial review. What is judicial review, you ask? It's the ability of the federal courts to review congressional laws, actions taken by the president, and laws and actions of the states for constitutionality. But it wasn't always this way. And it was a confrontation that involved three famous founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and James Madison. You see, when Adams was president, he was given authority from the Judiciary Act of 1801 to appoint a number of midnight judges who were a small group of judges in the Federalist Party, which was the same political party that Adams belonged to. This would ensure that the Federalist Party controlled the courts when Thomas Jefferson, who was not a Federalist, took over as president. One of these would-be midnight judges was William Marbury, whose appointment to be a justice of the peace was never delivered. When Thomas Jefferson became president, Secretary of State James Madison refused to deliver the commission to Marbury. This was the first time that a presidential election brought about a party change in the nation's short history. So the political tensions were high. Furious, Marbury took up his issue with the Supreme Court and asked them for a writ of mandamus, basically a document that would order Madison to deliver the commission. The court did not want to get involved in the partisan dispute between the parties, but it had to make a decision about the case. The justices found the solution in establishing a principle that Alexander Hamilton mentioned in Federalist Essay number 78 that highlights the role of the courts. Chief Justice John Marshall wrote the opinion for the court, which decided first that Marbury was entitled to the commission, but more importantly, they decided that the clause allowing the court to issue writs, which came from the 1789 Judiciary Act in the first place, was actually unconstitutional. Chief Justice John Marshall then outlined the role of the courts, saying, "It is the duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. Those who apply the rule to particular cases must, of necessity, expound and interpret that rule. If two laws conflict with each other, the courts must decide on the operation of each." This principle is called judicial review, and it invalidated an act of Congress through the power of the Supreme Court. And, although not in the Constitution, judicial review strongly supports the constitutional principle of checks and balances, and brings about a greater balance among all three branches. For a deeper understanding of Marbury versus Madison, explore the following questions. Some scholars have...
So that's basically what Marbury versus Madison did, is that there was an act passed by Congress, the Judiciary Act of 1801, and that act would allow the Supreme Court to be involved in it. And the Supreme Court itself says that we cannot be involved in it, and basically said that that act of Congress is unconstitutional based on the readings of the Constitution, because there is no power clearly stated by the Constitution that says that the Supreme Court has that power. So by doing that, it gave the Supreme Court power by saying it didn't have power. That's the irony of it. What it did was saying that that act of Congress declared it bad law. So basically, judicial review is the power of the courts to interpret any law passed by Congress, to whether if it's good law or bad law. So the final say of all laws is the Supreme Court. Here's a brief crash course how it works. Say the United States Congress passed a law saying that all Asian people must leave the United States in 30 days. So we have a class action suit against the United States for that law, and it goes to federal district court. Then, however the case is decided, then the next court is an appeals court. Then, however that case is decided, it may go to the Supreme Court. And when it goes to the Supreme Court can decide whether or not that law is constitutional or not. If it declares it unconstitutional, it's bad law and it cannot continue. Now, later on in the history of the United States, there will be issues about how the Supreme Court decisions are going to be enforced, but that's the issue. That's the big thing. The Supreme Court has the power to interpret any act of Congress, any act of the President, any legal act even of the states, whether or not it's constitutional or unconstitutional. Any questions on that? Everyone got it? Marbury versus Madison? Everyone understand? Did this video help?
Yes.
Alright, that's Marbury versus Madison in a nutshell.
Nice.
Hi.
You can't do it. Let me take a picture. Try it. Try to do the face.
What?
That's not how you do it, right, Daniel? Right.
Alright, so here's the deal. Do you know what political party John Marshall is in?
John Marshall.
The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court?
I think
He was a Federalist.
Oh,
So by asserting judicial review, he strengthened the judiciary. Because Madison and Jefferson would want less national government oversight on different things. So this strengthened the federal government. This tension is going on right now. That's why the Supreme Court is so important. Because the whole issue with this current justice that's being confirmed or not is the issue of whether or not it matters who's in the Supreme Court, because they have the final say in all laws being passed. So they could overturn abortion laws, they could overturn a lot of laws if they so choose.
so the Supreme Court, they can overthrow like state laws as well, right?
Yes,
Dang.
if they hear the case. It has to be, the process is they need to be sued first. I'll give you an example of a state law. In Colorado, there's a law that says that people that are LGBTQ must be served by businesses. A Christian baker refused to bake a cake for a wedding for a same-sex couple because he felt that violated his biblical principles. The state of Colorado sued the man, the business, Christian baker, because they felt that Christian baker violated the civil rights of the same-sex couple. That case was heard recently in the Supreme Court a few months ago.
Who won?
The Christian baker won in a narrow decision. So that's an example of what happened. State law. And you will see in the future, because you have state laws of segregation, Jim Crow, and they'll be overturned by the Supreme Court in the 1960s. Yes?
If it was a narrow decision, why was it 7-2?
The ruling, the decision itself was narrow. The interpretation was narrow.
Not the number of
Yeah.
votes.
Yeah.
Okay. So in essence, the Supreme Court wasn't originally assigned the power of judicial review. It set the precedent for itself
It was implied.
by the Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court,
Implied that it had
the Supreme Court declared it by an implied power in the Constitution. And Federalist Paper number 78 with Alexander Hamilton.
So they implied themselves.
How did the judiciary branch, how did they stray from, like, opinions, like, wait, what is
So how are they not biased?
Yeah, how are they not biased?
They are biased.
But they just have to act
Because
upon
it's
the
everybody
Constitution.
though, so they can't really be.
Well, technically, they're not. The technicality is that judges serve for life, so they're not worried about their jobs, so they can have some independence in how they decide. But, like for example, the reason why so many people voted for President Trump was because of the Supreme Court, because they knew that several Supreme Court justices are either going to die in office or going to retire. And by having a conservative president, he's going to place people that will support his agenda to be part of the Supreme Court. So right now, the Supreme Court is overwhelmingly, or getting more conservative now. By conservative, it means that they have a more literal interpretation of the Constitution. The other side, the liberal, is the loose construction. In other words, there's more of a liberal interpretation of the Constitution. Although it's not, the strict construction of the Constitution is, in order for it to be constitutional, it must be clearly written in the Constitution. The liberal side is that it could be implied. There are principles. Times change throughout the history, so we need to advance with the times. The Constitution are principles, but we can't stick closely word for word on issues. Like, for example, the Second Amendment to the Constitution. Right to bear arms. Loose constructionists or liberal court justices would say, well, we should have gun control. Times have changed. When the Second Amendment was passed, you had America was still new territory. There was a lot of trees. There was a lot of wild animals. There was a lot of hostile forces. We didn't have a standing military. Therefore, we needed citizens to arm themselves just for the practicality of the issue. But today, we have a professional military. We have a professional police force. We have professional law enforcement. Therefore, we should have greater control over guns, and guns should be regulated more. But that's the loose construction. That's the liberal side. The strict side says this. This is stated in the Constitution, right to bear arms, and we have to have that today. Because any deviation or change in the Constitution is a no-no. They don't take to the fact that the Constitution has been changed many times. So what view would you subscribe to?
Loose.
Loose?
So loose is the conservative, right?
No.
No, that's the liberals.
So loose was the liberal, which was the Republican Democratic Party.
No, strict was the Republic.
Yeah, strict was the Republican Democratic.
Loose was the Federalist.
Yeah.
So the Federalists would be the liberals of today?
You can't quantify that. It's a mix.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chong, don't we see later in the chapter when Jefferson was buying the Louisiana Purchase, didn't he kind of go against his own policies?
You hit the ball. You hit the nail on the head. We're going to talk about that more on Monday. Remember, what was Jefferson's motive? What was Jefferson for?
Strict construction.
Yeah, but like, who is he like advocating for?
Republicans. Oh, the farming.
And what do farmers need?
Land.
And so, what does the Louisiana Purchase Post provide for Jefferson? Land for his
farmers.
But there is an issue. He's going to have to go against his own political principles
That doesn't make sense.
to do it, because the Constitution does not say anything clearly about a president and purchasing land from other nations. But he declared it's an implied power. By virtue of being president and executive head of state, he has the power to do that. So Jefferson had to eat crow. That's why politics, they could say that, oh, I'm for this and I'm for this, but when the rubber hits the road and it's like a decision that they need to make that serves their best interests, they're going to go against what they say. That's what's politics.
But isn't it considered one of the best investments America ever made?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not doubting that. It was they ripped off the French.
Yeah.
It's only 15 million.
That's like, it was
Wasn't it like a lot
less
of-
than a US ship.
Well, and there was like a lot of gold found in
It propelled the United States to have to conquer from the east coast to the west coast of Louisiana Purchase.
Imagine we were on Earth.
Dude, it was basically a steal.
So I guess we're done for today. Have a happy Sabbath.
Alright, thank you.
Yes.
It was strong.
Good, Sean.